There's a misconception that by just showing up on time to your lesson on a regular basis, you're doing all that you need to do to get the best out of your lesson. Well, there might be some things that you're missing. Stick around and find out what they are. Hey, welcome to the Monique on the Mic podcast. I'm your host, Monique B. Thomas. This show is your go-to resource for professional and aspiring singers. Every Monday, join me for a mix of solo episodes and insightful interviews where I share real artist stories, practical strategies, and mindset shifts. Whether you're just starting out or are already on your journey, you'll find the tools you need to transform your vocal path and feel supported. I keep it real, I keep it fun, and it's always useful and up to date. Let's get into it. First thing I'd like you to think about is to have clarity in what you want from your voice in the long term and clarity in what you want from this particular lesson. When you first come to a teacher, it's usually because you've heard something about the teacher that made you want to study with them. Perhaps they teach a certain technique or a style of music that you're interested in. In any case, it's usually not a coincidence that you've popped up in their studio. On occasion, singers who are new to singing might just be curious about what it means to sing, and that is okay. Feel free to express that, as we've all been a beginner at some time, and not everyone is born knowing they want to sing. I'd suggest you give it a few lessons, following your teacher's practice instructions to see if it's for you or not. No harm done either way. You might want to write down your questions. I know from experience that students who are working actively on the voice come in with at least one question a week because there's so much to know about your voice and the voice in general. Now, the next thing I want you to think about are your working materials. So the first thing I want you to think about doing is making sure that you bring in generously spaced lyric sheets for yourself and for your teacher. Or you can send them via email, but have a copy that you can use for corrections. This is going to be important. Sometimes my students come in and they have songs that are in foreign languages. Sometimes these songs are original tunes, so I might not know the lyrics. But in any case, having a lyric sheet for me and for you is going to allow us to do much better work. Sometimes we need to do some work on pronunciation or vowel modifications, so having that is going to make things a lot easier. Make sure to bring your backing tracks on USB key or send them via email or AirDrop before the class. Or you could even inquire how it can be played through your teacher's sound system. Now, most non-classical voice teachers have a sound system with a mic, since that is what we're preparing you to do, sing with a mic. Have a charged telephone or recording device for listening back to your lessons, and actually listen back to your lessons. For hygienic reasons, you might want to bring your own microphone. So I think that's about it for the materials that you have. Obviously, you're going to want to have at least a pen or a pencil. I usually like a pencil to make corrections or changes, and maybe even a highlighter to highlight things that you absolutely must correct, things you want to remember. Now, here's another point: scheduling. The best thing to do is discuss with your teacher a schedule for your lessons. Your schedule might look very different from someone else's, and that really is okay. You will decide your schedule based on teacher-student availability, your budget, and your motivation. Keep in mind that the more often you see your teacher, the faster you'll make progress because repetition is key. The more you're exposed to what you're trying to learn, as if it were a cold, the more likely you are to catch it. Also, more frequent lessons can help guard against practicing errors. It will really stink to find out that you've been doing the exercises the wrong way for 4 weeks straight, wouldn't it? Let me give you an idea of what a schedule might look like for someone who's truly serious about their singing. I have a student who, during a period of about a month and a half, scheduled daily lessons, yes, even the weekends, but we had daily lessons, and they were on the Voice Kids and wanted to make sure everything was really on point. Whenever they have a special project like recordings or special live performances, they'll often book 5 lessons a week to really get deep into the project. Outside of the special projects, this same student would just normally book 1 weekly lesson. Now, this might seem over the top for some, but it speaks to what this student is looking for in their lessons and from their voice. They are serious about this singing thing. It's no wonder they're now studying at Berklee School of Music. Now, here's something that I recently learned about getting more worth out of your lessons, and this even surprised me. I've had a few students who were doing really well in class, but they were so irregular that it almost felt like we had to start all over again each class. The students would become very frustrated because they could see that the progress was possible. As, in every class, they were really understanding things. But then the progress between classes was so slow, it was too slow to feel tangible. So I did a little digging to find out why the students weren't regular with their lessons. One student said, "I just can't be bothered to schedule. Life is hectic, and I've got a newborn and so many things going on. I just tend to forget to schedule." Normally, I would just write off this kind of student because I'd be thinking, well, if it's important to you, you'll schedule it. And so if it's not important, if it's not getting scheduled, it's just not important to you. But the truth is, life be lifing sometimes, and it can be rough to take care of the little details. And I knew that when the student did show up for class, they were entirely engaged in their class. Another student admitted that they didn't schedule another lesson because they hadn't practiced in between, and then they felt bad, and so the vicious cycle began. They would have a lesson, they didn't practice, and then thinking, well, I can't take another lesson until I've done the work they asked me to do, which kind of makes sense, right? But my thought again is that, life is tough, and we all have weeks where we can practice more and weeks where we can't practice as much. That's actually not a big deal if overall you have a practice of practicing, or rather, mostly steady practice habit. So I found the solution to both of their problems. It was simply to do a subscription. In other words, the fact that the financial commitment was made in advance for the lessons means the one student suddenly can schedule their lessons, and because they have that standing appointment, the practicing gets done. Same thing with the other student. Because the class is written in their calendar, it receives priority, and again, the practice becomes a regular, and thus the progress begins. These are just a few cases of students who 10x'd their vocal progress immediately simply by doing a paid subscription, even just twice a month. Here's what Marcus Coward had to say about it. "Consistent daily practice and seeing step-by-step progress is very encouraging. It makes it hard to stop, as I don't want to lose the momentum I've gained this past week." Now, not everyone needs this hack in order to be regular, but if you are struggling to keep up with your lessons, you might want to ask your teacher about subscriptions. It could be a game changer. Let's talk about online lessons. In order for your online lessons to go well, there are a few things that must be in place. You must have great internet. If your internet is slow or prone to interruptions, it will be a very frustrating experience for everyone involved. Instead of spending time on the voice, you'll be dealing with tech issues, which is unnecessary. Make sure whatever apps you use, I use Skype and Zoom, make sure they're up to date, and make sure your computer is also in working condition. For your session, you might want to close out all unnecessary apps so that your computer doesn't have to fight with anything else from memory. It's usually preferable to do these lessons on a good computer rather than on phone or on tablet. If you try to do the lesson on Zoom on a phone or on a tablet, you won't be able to record the lesson unless you have another separate device. And if I want to share files with you, I won't be able to. It is also going to be tricky to play your backing tracks. And the other thing is there's some sound adjustments that you could make that you can only really make if you're on a computer. When you're on the phone or the tablet, those aren't available to you. So usually the best configuration is to do the online lesson on computer, allowing you to record in the app or even record with your phone, which is what I do. I like the recordings on my phone rather than in my computer because every time I'm in the car, it's an opportunity to practice. I get my daily practice done, and oftentimes I'll practice more than once. This keeps my head in the vocal game more often, which yields great results. I also sometimes just take note of the comments my teacher gives me because those are key to what I need to fix right now. Anyway, this is all a part of my personal journey with practicing. If you're finding that you're struggling to practice, because let's face it, we are rarely told how to practice, I want to offer you my practice guide for free. Check the show notes on how to get it. It'll change how you think about practicing forever. Oh, and one more thing about online lessons. Please check to make sure your camera and mic are working before the class. Just because it was working yesterday doesn't mean it'll work today. That'll save you so much time in your lesson and frustration too. Lastly, winter is coming. I'm personally just recovering from COVID, and I don't want to catch anything else. If you feel like you might be getting sick, start whatever preventative measures you might know of, like taking your vitamins, gargling with warm water and salt, as well as cleaning your sinuses with a sterilized saline solution. And do this for a couple of days as soon as you get the signs that you might be getting sick. Now, most reputable vocal studios have a cancellation policy, so you'll have to check to see if you can get out of your lesson without losing it. Mine is 48 hours, which in most cases gives students enough time to figure out if they can honor the lesson or not. If you think you might be contagious, lots of people around you are sick, for example, you can always opt for an online lesson rather than in person just this once. Because if you're sick, I don't want it. I really don't. Thank you. You can keep that. Another thing about lessons when you're sick, depending on how sick you are, these can be some of the most informative lessons for your voice. Here's why. When your voice is not 100%, your margin of error goes down substantially. This means that technically, you'll have to find the right way to sing because any other way won't work. Sometimes that can be a good thing, especially if you're someone who tends to overdo things when you sing. You stand to learn a great deal. Now, obviously, no one wants to be sick all of the time, but don't discount what you can learn about your voice if you're a little under the weather. By the way, a sore throat doesn't necessarily mean that you can't sing. Check with your voice teacher whether or not you should maintain the lesson. I hope you've gotten some valuable information on how to reap more benefits from your lessons. Here's a few key takeaways. 1. Get clear about what you want to accomplish in your lessons. 2. Prepare your materials ahead of time. 3. Set a lesson schedule and stick to it. Ask to do a subscription if you struggle with this. 4. Practice as regularly as possible, minimum 5 times per week if you really want to see progress. And number 5, make sure your computer is ready, including mic and camera, for your online lessons. If you're doing all these things in your lessons, as well as showing up on time, ready to work, I just know you're going to kill it. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're really liking what I'm throwing down, you'll love my Mike Masters newsletter. For more information on how to work with me and to sign up for the newsletter, visit www.moniquebthomas.com or check the show notes. Musically, Monique.